It started on a quiet night at the diner. Coffee cups rattled, lights flickered, and then the door slammed open. Two massive men walked straight toward my sister's wheelchair. They didn't smile. They didn't speak. They just grabbed her chair. And that's when everything I thought I knew about this neighborhood collapsed into chaos. But the real story, the part no one expected, was still to come. Welcome back to HOA Stories, where the suburbs aren't as peaceful as they look. My name is David. I live in a quiet little cul-de-sac just outside Houston, Texas. By day, I'm just a construction worker, a regular neighbor trying to keep the grass short and the bills paid. But by night, I've been fighting a war I never asked for, against the most controlling HOA you can imagine. And this story, it's about my sister, my brothers, and the night everything changed forever. The night it all began. I could still hear the sound of that door slamming in my head. It echoed like a gunshot inside that little diner. My sister froze, her hands gripping the edge of her wheelchair so tight her knuckles turned white. The coffee cup in front of her shook with every heartbeat. And me. I just sat there, trying to understand how our quiet neighborhood had turned into this nightmare. But maybe I should go back, because nothing about this story makes sense, unless you know who I am, and what kind of place we live in. My name is David. I live in a suburb just outside Houston. One of those neighborhoods where every lawn looks the same, every house has the same paint, the same shutters, the same perfect mailbox. If you leave your trash can out too long, you get a letter. If your grass grows half an inch too tall, you get a fine. And if you build something they don't like, well, they make your life hell. That's the power of the HOA, the HOA, Owners Association, a group of people with clipboards and smiles that never reach their eyes. They call it keeping order. I call it a prison with white fences. After my sister's accident, she came to live with me. She was only 23, still young, still full of life, but the chair changed how people looked at her. Not just pity, but annoyance, like she was a stain on their perfect little world. The HOA president, a woman named Mrs. Cartwright, never missed a chance to remind us. She called her a distraction. She told me the ramp I built for my sister was unauthorized. She even said, and I'll never forget this, wheelchairs ruin the view of the street. I thought it was just words. I thought maybe she was cruel, but not dangerous. I was wrong. One morning, a letter appeared on my door. It wasn't folded. It wasn't polite. It was taped there like a warning. They demanded I remove the wheelchair ramp within 7 days. They said it was an eyesore and not compliant with neighborhood guidelines. And of course, there was a fine, $500. I laughed when I read it, because how could anyone think that a wheelchair ramp was worse than a life without one? I threw it in the trash and went to work. But that was only the beginning. More letters came. One under the windshield wiper of my truck. One shoved into our mailbox without a stamp. One slipped under the diner door where we ate breakfast. Each letter grew meaner, darker, more personal. The last one didn't even bother with rules. It just said 3 words: cripple girl out. That's when I started to feel it. The eyes watching our house at night, the sound of footsteps when no one was there, the faint smell of smoke near the edge of our lawn. The neighborhood wasn't safe anymore, not for her. And yet, she still insisted on going to that diner. She said it was the one place she felt normal. The cough. Fee was weak. The food was greasy. But the people didn't stare at her like she was broken, so I let her go, because I wanted her to have at least one safe place. But safety doesn't last long when the HOA decides you're the enemy. That night, the diner was nearly empty. A few truckers at the counter, the cook humming to himself behind the grill, and us, sitting in the corner booth near the window. She was laughing about something. I can't even remember what. And for a second, it felt like life had gone back to normal. Then the door slammed open. 2 men walked in, not neighbors, not locals. They were too big, too polished, too intentional, matching boots, matching jackets, like they were part of some twisted uniform. And the way they looked at us, cold, straight ahead, like they had been sent. My stomach dropped, because I knew exactly who sent them. The HOA had finally made good on their threat. They didn't order food. They didn't even look around. They walked straight to our booth. One of them grabbed her chair. The other leaned in so close I could smell the sweat on his skin. "She doesn't belong here," he said, his voice flat, like he was reading a line in a script. "Time to move her out." I froze. I wanted to fight, but I knew I couldn't win against men like this. I wanted to scream, but my throat closed, and for a moment, I thought this was how it would end. But then, another sound filled the diner, another door opening, and this time, it was the sound I had been waiting for. Even if I didn't know it, my brothers, my twin brothers, both Navy SEALs, both just back from deployment, both bigger and stronger than the thugs who thought they could scare us. The look in their eyes. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't even anger. It was pure ice. Like they had seen this before, like they were ready. One of the thugs turned to face them, but he didn't have time to react, because in one move, my brother had him pinned to the wall. The other twin grabbed the second man by the arm and twisted so hard I heard the pop. The diner erupt. Ed, coffee cups spilled, silverware clattered. The cook shouted something I couldn't hear, and my sister. She didn't move, she just stared, wide-eyed, as her brothers tore the place apart for the first time in weeks. I felt something I hadn't felt before. Hope. Because if the HOA wanted a war, they were about to get one, and this time, we weren't fighting alone. But here's what I keep wondering. If the HOA had the guts to send thugs into a diner full of people, what else would they be willing to do behind closed doors? The diner went silent after the fight. Plates shattered on the floor. Chairs flipped over. And the two men who had dared to touch my sister now lay groaning against the wall. My brothers stood over them, calm, steady, like this was just another mission. But me, my hands were still shaking. Because even though the thugs had been handled, I knew this was only the beginning. The HOA had crossed a line, and lines once crossed can never be erased. The police showed up a few minutes later. Blue lights painted the diner windows. Sirens faded as they parked. The cook explained what happened. The truckers nodded in agreement. Everyone said the same thing. Those men came straight for us, but when the officers asked who they worked for, the men kept their mouths shut. Not a word, not even a name, just smirks, like they knew they'd walk away without punishment, and they did. The police let them go. Just like that, I felt rage burning in my chest. If the HOA could send hired muscle and get away with it, what chance did we have? What chance did my sister have? My brothers weren't afraid, though. After the officers left, they pulled me aside in the parking lot. One of them said, "This isn't random, David. This is organized." The other said, "If they think we're scared, they're wrong." And for a moment, standing there under T-Shiro, he buzzing diner sign, I believed them. The next day, the neighborhood felt different. Lawns looked the same. Fences stood in perfect rows. Kids rode bikes down the street, but behind every curtain, I could feel eyes watching. Every smile felt fake. Every wave felt rehearsed. And then came the letter. This one wasn't taped to my door. It was nailed through the wood like a warning from the old days. It read, "Remove the ramp or pay the price." The nail itself scraped the paint on my front door. I stared at it for a long time, longer than I should have. My sister wheeled up beside me. Her voice was soft when she asked, "Are they really going to hurt us again?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to promise her it would all be okay. But the truth hung heavy between us. We both knew the answer. That night my brothers didn't sleep. They sat on the porch in silence, shadows under the streetlight, every car that passed, every rustle of the trees. They watched like hawks. The quiet suburb had turned into a battlefield. And then, around midnight, we heard it. A sound that didn't belong. The slow crunch of footsteps on gravel. Closer, closer. Until they stopped at the edge of the yard. We didn't move. We just listened. And then, a whisper carried across the lawn. "Cripple girl doesn't belong here." My blood froze. By the time I jumped up, the shadow was gone. But in its place, on the ramp itself, lay a small red can of spray paint. The words sprayed across the wood were ugly. Out. My sister cried when she saw it in the morning, not because of the word, but because of the reminder. The reminder that no matter how strong we were, someone wanted her gone. My brothers cleaned the paint off, but I could still see the faint outline, like a scar you can't erase. We tried to live normal after that. But normal doesn't last when your enemy hides behind rules and papers. The HOA sent another notice. This time, they claimed our trash cans were not hidden prop. Early, $100 fine. Then another letter, saying the flowers in the yard were not approved colors. Another fine. It was like they were daring us to fight back. A game of psychological warfare. Each letter meant to break us a little more. But what they didn't understand was that they weren't fighting a broken family. They were fighting Navy SEALs, and a brother who had finally reached his limit. One night, we held a family meeting around the kitchen table. The ramp stood outside under the moonlight. My sister looked at both of my brothers, her voice trembling. "I don't want you to get in trouble because of me." But my brother leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "You are not the problem," he said. "They are." And that's when it changed. No more waiting, no more hoping the HOA would stop. We decided to fight back, but not with fists, not with threats. We would fight with their own weapon. Compliance. The next morning, my brothers and I began. We read every single line of the HOA handbook, every page, every rule, every tiny ridiculous detail, mailbox height, fence paint, grass length. We knew it all. And then, we followed every single one of their rules to the letter. We cut the grass exactly to regulation. We repainted the fence with the exact approved color. We even fixed the mailbox so it stood at the precise allowed inches above the curb. We gave them nothing to fine us for, nothing at all. But we weren't just obeying, we were watching. And what we saw made our blood boil. Because while they were punishing us, they were breaking their own rules. The president's hedge was 2 inches too tall. Her driveway had a crack wider than the allowed limit. And her holiday lights, still hanging in March, a clear violation. The hypocrisy was laid bare in front of us, and we knew then, the war wasn't just about my sister. It was about power. It was about control. And if the HOA wanted control, we were going to rip it out of their hands. The night we made that decision, I sat with my sister on the porch. She looked at me with tired eyes and whispered, "Why do they hate me so much?" I didn't have an answer. Maybe it wasn't about her. Maybe it was about the kind of people who smile while they destroy others, the kind who hide behind rules, but live in fear of being exposed. And as I held her hand, I thought about the battles still to come. The HOA had money, they had lawyers, they had connections, but we had something stronger: family. We became shadows in our own neighborhood, watching, waiting, studying every move the HOA made. It felt strange at first, living under the same rules they tried to crush us with. But the more we watched, the more we realized something. The rules were never the problem, the people in power were. I carried that thick handbook with me everywhere, pages filled with small print, ridiculous regulations, and legal words meant to scare people. But to us, it became a weapon. Every line was a weakness waiting to be exposed. My brothers were soldiers, trained to look for flaws in enemy defenses. They treated the HOA handbook like a battle map. One night at the kitchen table, they highlighted section after section, violations they had seen with their own eyes, mailboxes too tall, hedges too wide, trash cans left out longer than allowed, and the biggest joke of all, the HOA president herself, Mrs. Cartwright, queen of the cul-de-sac, breaker of her own commandments. Her mailbox was crooked, her lawn had weeds, her shed was 2 feet taller than regulations allowed. It was like she thought the rules only applied to us, and maybe for years they did, but not anymore. We started collecting evidence, photos taken quietly at night, documents pulled from public records, little things neighbors whispered when they thought no one would repeat it. Slowly, piece by piece, the image of the HOA began to crack. Behind their perfect smiles was rot, and we were ready to show it. But here's the thing about power. When people have it, they never give it up without a fight. One morning I walked outside to find something new on the lawn. A sign, big red letters hammered into the ground right by the ramp. Non-compliant. The word glared at me like blood on white wood. Neighbors passed by and pretended not to look. But I saw the way their eyes lingered. Pity for us, fear for themselves. My sister wheeled out and stopped in front of it, her face pale, her hands trembling on the wheels. "Am I the reason this is happening?" she whispered. I crouched down beside her. "No," I said. "You're the reason we're fighting." But I'll admit, the sign broke something in me. It wasn't about fines anymore. It wasn't about grass or paint or trash cans. It was war. A war against anyone who dared to live outside their perfect little picture. That night, my brothers decided enough was enough. We gathered in the living room. Lights low, tension thick. One brother spread out the photos we had collected, every violation, every broken rule, every hypocrisy. The other brother tapped the table with his finger. "We hit them where it hurts," he said. "We use their own rules against them." And that's exactly what we did. The next day we mailed formal complaints, not one, not two, but a stack of them, each complaint backed with evidence, each one targeting an HOA board member. They couldn't ignore it, not when it was documented, signed, official. They had built their kingdom on rules, and we were about to bury them under it. The fallout came quick at the next board meeting. Whispers filled the air. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. One by one the violations were read aloud. Not ours. Theirs, the HOA president's shed, the treasurer's cracked driveway, the secretary's holiday lights. Lights still hanging from the gutters. The board tried to laugh it off. They tried to dismiss it, but we had proof. Undeniable proof. And once neighbors saw that, something changed. The fear began to crack. People who had stayed silent started to speak. A widow down the street admitted she'd been fined 3 times for flowers not matching the pallet. A young couple whispered they were threatened with foreclosure over a missing fence post. Even the truck driver at the corner house said he paid hundreds for parking his rig in his own driveway. The HOA's grip was slipping, and they knew it. That week, we started receiving phone calls at night. No words, just breathing. Sometimes laughter, sometimes silence. It didn't scare me, not anymore. But my sister jumped every time the phone rang. Her smile grew smaller each day, and that broke me more than anything. I thought about leaving, selling the house, starting over somewhere new. But then I remembered the ramp I built with my own hands, the ramp that gave my sister her freedom, and I knew leaving wasn't an option. The HOA wasn't just attacking her. They were attacking dignity itself, and dignity is something worth fighting for. My brothers stood with me. Every night they patrolled the street like soldiers on watch. Neighbors started to notice. Some waved at us for the first time. Others whispered thank you when no one else could hear. It felt like the tide was turning, but just when we thought we had them cornered. The HOA struck back harder than ever. One morning we woke to find an envelope in the mailbox. Inside wasn't a fine, wasn't a warning. It was a lawsuit, filed against me personally, claiming I was in serious violation and a danger to neighborhood integrity. I stared at the papers, hands trembling. They weren't just trying to scare us now. They wanted to take the house. They wanted to break us completely. My sister read the words over my shoulder, tears forming in her eyes. "What if they win?" she asked. I didn't answer, because in that moment, I didn't know. The suburbs had become a battlefield. Every hedge, every mailbox, every petty rule was a weapon. And somehow, we were still standing. But for how long? I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of crickets outside. And a thought kept clawing at me. How far would the HOA go? Would they burn us out? Would they crush us with lawyers until we had nothing left? Or would the neighborhood finally rise with us and tear down the monsters in charge? The lawsuit felt heavier than any fine, heavier than any note or threat we had received before. It wasn't just paper. It was a weapon meant to break us in silence. Without fists, without witnesses, I held those pages in my hands like they were fire. The words twisted and cold, written in the kind of legal language designed to confuse you. Neighborhood integrity, undermining association standards, deliberate non-compliance. It sounded official, powerful, final. My sister sat at the kitchen table, staring at the ramp outside the window. Her wheelchair wheels squeaked as she turned slightly. "Do we have to leave now?" she asked. Her voice was small, but in it was the weight of everything we had fought for. I didn't answer right away, because part of me wondered if leaving would be easier, selling the house, packing our lives into boxes, driving away, and never looking back. But then I thought of the smug smile of Mrs. Cartwright, and the thought of giving her that victory made my blood boil. My brothers weren't silent for long. One slammed his fist on the table. "This is their last card," he said. "They can't beat us with rules anymore, so now they're hiding behind lawyers." The other leaned closer. "And if they want war in court, we'll give them war." But I wasn't sure. Court meant money. Court meant months of stress. Court meant strangers deciding if our home even belonged to us that night. I barely slept. Every creak of the house, every hum of the refrigerator, sounded like a countdown. The suburbs had gone too far, and somehow we were still standing in the middle of it. The next morning, my brothers drove into town to find a lawyer. I stayed home with my sister. She wanted pancakes, so I made them. She wanted to sit on the porch, so we did. The ramp looked clean now, the red spray paint gone. But I still saw it. The faint scar of those 3 letters burned into my memory. Out. Neighbors walked by. Some waved awkwardly, some turned their heads away. But one woman, a single mom from down the street, stopped. She looked at the ramp, then at me, and for the first time she whispered, "Thank you for standing up." It caught me off guard. No one had ever said that before, and in her eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in weeks. Hope that night. My brothers returned with news. They had found a lawyer willing to take the case, not for free, but for less than we expected, and the best part, the lawyer already hated the HOA, apparently. We weren't the first family they tried to crush. We gathered around the living room, the lawyer's papers spread across the coffee table, every violation we had documented, every hypocrisy we had uncovered, every neighbor's whispered story. It was all there, and for the first time, I saw a chance. But the HOA wasn't going to go down quietly. They doubled the fines. They sent inspectors to our house twice in 1 week. They even called animal control on us, claiming we had a dangerous dog. We didn't even own a dog. It was psychological warfare. Every letter, every knock on the door, was meant to wear us down. But instead, it built us up, because the more they attacked, the more neighbors began to see the truth. At the next HOA meeting, the room was packed. People who had never shown up before filled the seats. Voices rose louder than I had ever heard. A man shouted about his driveway fines. A woman cried about threats she received for hanging her laundry outside. The board tried to control the room. They pounded the gavel. They demanded silence, but silence was gone. The neighborhood had woken up. I stood at the back, my brothers on either side, my sister in her chair near the door. And when neighbors turned to us, something shifted. They didn't see victims anymore. They saw fighters. The board ended the meeting early, faces red, voices shaking. Mrs. Cartwright refused to look at me as she walked out. But I caught the fear in her eyes. For the first time, she knew she was losing. The lawsuit still loomed over us, heavy and dangerous. But now, we weren't alone. Neighbors started leaving notes on our porch. Not threats, but thank yous, cookies in Tupperware, cards that said, "Stay strong." Even cash slipped into envelopes. The suburbs had started to crack, and light was breaking through. But power doesn't die quietly. And one night, we were reminded just how far the HOA was willing to go. It was around midnight when the sound came, a loud bang, then another. I jumped from bed and ran to the window, and there, at the edge of the ramp, flames danced in the dark. Someone had lit it on fire. I rushed outside with a bucket of water. My brothers grabbed the hose. Together we put it out before it spread, but the ramp was scorched, blackened at the edges, charred like the heart of the people who wanted us gone. My sister sat in the doorway, tears running down her face, her safe place, her freedom, attacked again. And in that moment, I swore to myself, we would not lose, we would not run, we would fight until the HOA was nothing but ash. The next day, we filed a police report. We showed them the burned ramp, the threats, the letters. But once again, nothing happened. No arrests, no charges, just promises to look into it. It was clear, if justice was going to happen, it wouldn't come. If from the system, it would have to come from us. The lawsuit hearing was set for the following month. The board thought they had the upper hand. But they didn't know what we had collected. They didn't know the neighborhood was watching. They didn't know their power was already slipping away. My brothers trained like it was war. Every morning they ran drills in the yard. Every night they studied papers like battle maps. And me, I held my sister's hand and reminded her every day, we are not alone anymore, the night before the hearing. I barely slept. The weight of it all pressed down on me. Would a judge see the truth? Would the HOA twist the law until we were homeless? Would neighbors stand with us? Or stay silent when it mattered most? The only sound in the dark house was my sister's quiet breathing down the hall, and the burning question inside my chest. Was this fight finally about to end? Or was it only the beginning of something far worse? The courthouse smelled of old wood and paper, the kind of place where stories get rewritten into law. We walked through the doors as a family, my brothers on either side of me. My sister wheeling forward with her head held high. People stared, some curious, some judgmental. But none of them knew the war we had already fought. The HOA board sat across the aisle, Mrs. Cartwright in her pearl necklace, her lips pulled into that fake smile. Beside her were two men in suits, sharp, polished, and expensive, lawyers bought with neighborhood money. The judge entered, the room went quiet, and just like that, the fight for our home began. Their lawyer stood first. He spoke with confidence, rehearsed and cold. He called us disruptive. He said our ramp degraded the aesthetic of the community. He even dared to say my sister's wheelchair was an unfortunate distraction from neighborhood values. I gripped the table so hard my knuckles ached. My sister's hands shook in her lap. My brothers whispered under their breath. But they stayed still. We had to hold our fire. Not yet. Then our lawyer stood, and for the first time, I felt like the truth had a voice. He spoke of dignity, of rights, of what it means to live in a community. He showed photos of the ramp, simple, clean, safe, and then he showed photos of the HOA board's own violations. The crooked mailbox, the tall hedges, the cracked driveway. The courtroom shifted. People murmured. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Cartwright's fake smile faltered for the first time. But the HOA wasn't done. They brought witnesses, neighbors who had been pressured, bribed, or scared into testifying against us. One said our yard was messy. Another claimed the ramp was dangerous. A third said we had brought trouble into the neighborhood. Each word cut like a knife, because it wasn't just lies, it was betrayal. I wanted to stand and shout. I wanted to tell the judge everything, about the threats, about the fire, about the men in the diner. But our lawyer pressed my arm down. Patience, he whispered. Let them dig their own grave. And they did, because when it was our turn, neighbors we didn't expect stood up. The single mom who whispered thanks on the porch, the truck driver fined for his rig, the widow punished for her flowers. One by one they told their stories. One by one they turned the courtroom into a stage of truth. The judge listened. He scribbled notes. His eyes narrowed at Mrs. Cartwright. By the time the last neighbor finished, the room no longer felt balanced. The HOA looked smaller. We looked stronger. Then came the moment that cracked the whole thing open. Our lawyer pulled out a folder. Inside were receipts, payments made to the very men who attacked us at the diner. The names were redacted, but the bank account traced back to the HOA's budget, money that was supposed to fix sidewalks, used to hire thugs. Gasps filled the room. The judge leaned forward. Mrs. Cartwright's face went pale. My sister's and squeezed mine, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled. But it wasn't over yet. The HOA's lawyer tried to spin it. He claimed the payments were for security services. He said the men were misunderstood contractors. It was pathetic. Everyone in the room knew it. The judge called for order. His gavel struck hard against the wood. He set a date for final judgment, said he needed time to review everything, and just like that, the session ended. We walked out together, neighbors following us into the sunlight. Some clapped us on the back. Others whispered words of courage. The tide had turned. But victory in court didn't mean safety at home. That night, our mailbox was smashed, bent metal, letters scattered across the lawn. The next night, someone slashed my truck's tires. The night after that, a brick came through the kitchen window with a note attached. Quit while you can. The neighborhood was splitting down the middle. Some supported us, some hated us, and some were too afraid to choose. My sister couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made her jump. Every shadow outside made her cry. I hated seeing her like that. I hated knowing we had dragged her into this fight, but she was the reason we couldn't stop. One night, my brothers gathered me in the garage. "We need to end this," one said. "Not with fists," the other added, "but by exposing everything." So we planned. We set up cameras around the house. We collected more evidence. We talked to neighbors quietly, recording their stories, every petty fine, every threat, every cruel note. We piled it all together like ammunition. The suburbs weren't just a prison anymore. They were a battlefield with hidden mines, and we were finally learning where they were buried. Then came the second court date. The board looked weaker this time, their smiles cracked, their shoulders heavy. The courtroom wasn't packed with their allies anymore. It was filled with neighbors who had been waiting for justice. Our lawyer laid everything out: the hypocrisy, the bus, the violence, and finally, the brick with the note. He placed it on the judge's desk, the word "quit" scrawled in black across the paper. Silence hung heavy over the room. The judge leaned back in his chair, his face unreadable. Then he spoke. "I have seen HOAs act petty, but I have never seen one act this cruel." His words cut through the room like a blade, and in that moment, we knew. We weren't losing this fight. The decision wasn't final yet, but the weight had shifted. The HOA had built their empire on fear, and now, fear was working against them. We left the courthouse into bright sunlight. Reporters were waiting, neighbors followed. The story was spreading beyond our street, beyond our cul-de-sac, and maybe, just maybe, beyond our town. But with attention comes danger, because people who are losing power don't just surrender, they claw, they scratch, they burn. That night, we heard footsteps again, closer than before. My brothers jumped from bed, ready, alert. And when they opened the door, no one was there, just a dead bird on the porch, its wings spread wide, its chest pinned with another note: "Last warning." My sister cried when she saw it in the morning. I picked up the bird, buried it in the backyard, and I swore to myself this would end. One way or another, we weren't just fighting for a ramp anymore. We were fighting for every person crushed under their rules, but deep inside, I kept asking myself something. Even if we win in court, even if the board falls apart, will the scars ever heal, or will this neighborhood always be a battlefield? The night after the second hearing, the air felt heavier than ever. It was like the whole street was holding its breath. Cars moved slower, curtains twitched more often, and every sound seemed louder than it should have been. I couldn't shake the image of that dead bird, its wings spread wide, the note pinned to its chest: "Last warning." Those two words played in my mind again and again. They weren't just a threat, they were a promise. My brothers doubled their patrols. One sat on the porch with a flashlight and a baseball bat. The other walked the street in silence. Every shadow scanned like he was back on deployment. And me. I stayed inside with my sister. I tried to keep her calm, tried to remind her that we were strong. But the truth was, I was scared too. The HOA was cornered, and cornered animals bite hardest. The next morning, a neighbor came to our door, an older man with shaky hands. He glanced around before speaking. "They're planning something," he whispered. "Cartwright's holding secret meetings at her house." My stomach twisted. Secret meetings meant strategies, and strategies meant attacks. We thanked him. But he didn't stay long. Fear pushed him back to his own porch, and I couldn't blame him, because speaking out in this neighborhood came with a price. That night, the windows rattled with the sound of fireworks. But when we looked outside, it wasn't fireworks. It was firecrackers thrown at our yard. Children laughed in the distance. But the laughter wasn't innocent. It was cruel, taught cruelty, passed down from parents who wanted us gone. The ramp was scorched again. The smell of sulfur lingered in the grass, and my sister cried herself to sleep in the room down the hall. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to my brothers outside keeping watch, and for the first time, I wondered if we were fighting an enemy too big to win. But the very next day, something shifted. A group of neighbors showed up at our door, not with threats, not with fines, but with food, casseroles, pies, bottled water, little offerings of solidarity. "We're tired of them too," one woman said. "They've been bleeding us dry for years," another whispered. A man in a work shirt stepped forward. "If you stand, we'll stand with you." Hope flickered again, and for the first time, I realized this wasn't just our figs. It was everyone's. Word spread quickly. Whispers at mailboxes, Conversations on sidewalks, people finally admitting what they had endured. The HOA's power was cracking, one voice at a time, but Mrs. Cartwright wasn't done. At the next official meeting, she showed up with guards, not thugs this time, but hired security. Men in black uniforms who stood at the doors with arms crossed. The room was tense. Neighbors filled the chairs. Whispers turned to shouts. Anger boiled just below the surface. Cartwright slammed her gavel again and again. "Order," she demanded. But there was no order left to give. One man stood up, shouting about unfair fines. A woman waved papers in the air. Eviction threats for late payments. Someone else yelled about stolen funds. The guards moved forward, but they didn't scare anyone anymore. And then, it happened. A neighbor pulled out a folder. Inside were documents, bank statements, proof that HOA funds were being siphoned into Cartwright's personal account, vacations, jewelry, even a new car, paid for with the very money they took from us. Gasps filled the room. Cartwright's face turned white. She tried to deny it. But the numbers were there. The truth was undeniable. The meeting erupted, voices shouting over one another. Some demanded her resignation, others demanded her arrest. The guards tried to quiet the chaos, but they couldn't stop it. The neighborhood had turned against its queen. I watched from the back, my sister gripping my arm, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. And for the first time in months, I saw something in her face. Relief, but relief never lasts long in war. That night, our porch light shattered. A rock wrapped in paper landed on the steps. "Snitches burn," it read. My brothers found tire tracks in the grass, too close to the house, and in the distance, we saw shadows moving between fences. The board was crumbling. But its loyalists were desperate, and desperation is dangerous. We decided then, we couldn't just defend anymore, we had to strike back. So we organized. Neighbors gathered in our living room, sitting on couches and folding chairs. Stories spilled out like water. Every unfair fine, every humiliation, every cruel note. We wrote them all down. We photographed every paper. We filed reports. We built a mountain of evidence, and then we leaked it. Local news picked it up. Suburban HOA accused of corruption. The headlines spread like wildfire. Suddenly, the quiet cul-de-sac wasn't so quiet anymore. Cameras showed up, reporters knocked on doors, and Mrs. Cartwright's empire began to crumble in public view. But public shame can turn into private rage, and we knew she wouldn't go quietly. One night, we caught them. 3 men creeping through our yard, one with a gas can, another with a hammer, the third holding a bat. My brothers moved faster than I had ever seen. In seconds, the men were on the ground, the gas can kicked away, the hammer clattering across the driveway, the bat snapped in half. The men begged, swore they weren't sent, swore they were just angry. But we knew better. They didn't come on their own. They came because someone pointed them at us. The police arrived, took statements. But again, no arrests, just promises. It was clear, if justice was going to come, it wouldn't come from badges or gavels. It would come from us, from neighbors who finally stood together. The lawsuit's final hearing loomed. The neighborhood was a tinderbox. Cartwright was desperate, and we were ready. I stood on the porch that night, the cool air heavy with silence. My sister wheeled up beside me, her voice soft but steady. "Do you think we'll win?" I didn't answer right away, because victory wasn't certain, because even if we won, scars would remain. Finally I said, "We don't need to win. We just need them to lose." She nodded, and for the first time. She didn't look afraid, she looked ready. But here's the question that kept me awake until morning: when power collapses, when people who ruled with fear finally fall, does peace come back to the neighborhood, or does the fight just find a new face? The final hearing felt like the end of a storm, the kind where the sky turns black and the air tastes like metal. We walked into the courthouse together, my brothers on either side, my sister wheeling forward with her chin high. Neighbors filled the seats, some for us, some against us, but all of them watching. Mrs. Cartwright was already there. Her pearls gleamed under the lights, but her face was pale. The guards she once surrounded herself with were gone. Her allies sat stiff and silent, and for the first time, she looked small. The judge entered. The room hushed. and the trial began. Their lawyer went first. His voice cracked as he repeated the same tired arguments. Non-compliance, property values, neighborhood integrity. But the words felt hollow now. The power they once carried had drained away. Our lawyer stood, calm, deliberate. He laid everything out. The fines, the threats, the fire, the smashed mailbox, the hired thugs, and finally, the stolen money. He placed the bank records on the judge's desk, page after page of proof, trips, jewelry, cars, all bought with HOA funds. The judge flipped through the papers, his face unreadable. The room was silent except for the turning of pages. And then, he spoke. This association has abused its power in ways I cannot ignore. His words cut through the air like thunder. He ruled the lawsuit invalid. He ruled the fines illegal. And then, he dissolved the board, the HOA. Gone in an instant, gasps filled the room. Neighbors clutched each other. Cartwright's mouth fell open, her pearls trembling on her neck. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. She had built her empire on fear, and it had collapsed in front of everyone. My sister gripped my arm so tight I thought she might break it. Tears ran down her cheeks. But this time, they weren't from fear. They were from relief. We walked out of the courthouse into bright sunlight. Neighbors followed us, some cheering, some silent. But none could deny what had happened. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. But victory never comes without scars. That night, the street was quiet, too quiet. No footsteps, no rocks, no laughter in the dark, just silence. My brothers sat on the porch like they always did. But their shoulders were finally relaxed. I sat with my sister, watching the stars. She whispered, "Does this mean it's over?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe that tearing down the HOA meant peace. But deep inside, I wasn't sure, because power never really dies. It just changes hands. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood shifted. Some houses lit up with laughter again. Children rode bikes without fear of notes taped to doors. Lawns grew a little wilder. Fences stood a little crooked, and no one cared. Neighbors who once stayed silent now greeted us with warm smiles. Some apologized, some offered help, and slowly, the fear faded. But not everyone was happy. Cartwright disappeared from public view. But whispers followed her. Some said she moved to another town. Some said she planned revenge. Others claimed she was still lurking, waiting for her chance. My brothers kept watch for a while longer. Old habits die hard, but even they began to relax eventually. Navy SEALs in rocking chairs, drinking coffee, watching squirrels instead of enemies. My sister started smiling again, real smiles. She rolled down the ramp every morning, breathing in the air like it belonged to her. Sometimes she went to the diner alone, sometimes neighbors joined her, and every time, she came home safe. The ramp still bore the faint scars of fire and paint, but we left them there, because scars tell stories, and this story was worth remembering one evening. As the sun dipped low and the sky turned orange, I sat on the porch with her. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. The silence felt whole again, safe again. Then she turned to me and asked, "Do you think they'll ever come back?" I didn't know. Maybe Cartwright was gone for good. Maybe she was planning her next move in the shadows. Maybe another face would rise in her place. But I looked at her, at the ramp, at the house we nearly lost, and I said, "If they do, we'll be ready." Because that was the truth. We weren't afraid anymore. Not of fines, not of letters, not of threats in the dark. The suburbs had tried to break us, but instead, they had made us unbreakable. Still, the question lingers in my mind: when power falls, does peace really last, or does the hunger for control always find its way back into perfect streets and white fences? And that's what I want to ask you. If your enemy was finally crushed, if justice was served right in front of your eyes, would you trust peace to last, or would you keep watching the shadows for the next fight? Tell me in the comments, because deep down, I'm still watching too.